They said I was nothing. Wolfless, bloodless, unworthy of the surname I carried. My uncle Alpha Garrett Kinsley reminded me of it every single day with the back of his hand, with the coldness of his silence, with the way he spoke my mother's name like a curse. But the night he struck me in open court, the night my blood hit the marble, before 100 wolves, something older than any Alpha's power stirred in the shadows. And the savage Lycan King who had never shown mercy to anyone looked at my uncle with death written in his golden eyes and said the words that changed everything. Touch her again and die. The iron pendant was cold against my collarbone, the way it always was, the way it had been since my mother pressed it into my 6-year-old palm and whispered, "Keep this close, little moon. It carries what they cannot take from you." That had been 12 years ago. Now the pendant was tarnished. Its once bright crescent shape dulled by years of sweat and secrecy, tucked beneath the collar of whatever threadbare dress the servants' quarters could spare. I touched it through the fabric as I knelt on the cold stone floor of Kinsley Manor's kitchen, scrubbing dried blood from the tile where one of my uncle's enforcers had disciplined a rogue Omega the night before. The blood was stubborn. It had seeped into the grout dark and metallic, and the smell of it sat in the back of my throat like copper pennies. I could always smell blood more keenly than anyone around me, though I'd learned never to say so. In a pack that measured worth by the power of one's wolf, admitting I could sense things, hear things, feel things without possessing a wolf at all was worse than useless. It was suspicious. "Sera," the voice cracked through the kitchen like a whip. Marta, the head cook, stood in the doorway with flour on her apron and fury in her eyes. "The Alpha wants fresh linens in the Great Hall. The Lycan King's envoy arrives at dusk, and if a single thing is out of place, your uncle will have us all scrubbing latrines until winter." My stomach tightened. The Lycan King's envoy. Don't make me repeat myself. I rose, my knees aching, and wrung the bloodied rag into a bucket. The Lycan King. Even the name sent a ripple of unease through the pack whenever it was spoken. Cade Thornheart, sovereign of all Lycan bloodlines, ruler of the Obsidian Throne, a creature whose power was said to make alpha wolves drop to their knees from the sheer weight of his presence. No one alive had challenged him and survived. The rumors said he was barely a man at all, more beast than anything, savage and ancient. His wolf so fused with his human form that his eyes glowed gold even in daylight. Why would such a being send anyone to Kinsley territory? I moved through the corridors quickly, arms loaded with folded linen, head down. That was the trick to surviving in my uncle's house. Stay small, stay quiet, stay invisible. I had perfected the art of it since the day my parents died. My mother from a wasting sickness that no healer could explain. My father from grief that followed 6 months later. Alpha Garrett Kinsley, my father's older brother, had taken me in. Not out of love, not out of duty, out of appearances. A wolfless niece was a stain on his bloodline, but an abandoned wolfless niece was worse. It suggested weakness, and Garrett could not abide weakness. So I stayed. I cooked, cleaned, mended, and endured. I endured the whispers of the pack members who called me hollow. I endured the casual cruelties of my cousins Kaylin and Vivian, who delighted in reminding me that I was nothing more than a servant with a family name. And I endured Garrett himself. His cold gray eyes, his iron grip on my arm when I displeased him, the low growl in his voice that was meant for disobedient wolves but landed on me with the same force. The Great Hall was already buzzing with activity when I arrived. Beta Nash, my uncle's right hand, was barking orders at a team of Omegas arranging the long banquet table. Candles were being lit. The ancestral banners of the Kinsley line, silver wolves on a field of black, hung from the vaulted ceiling, their edges freshened with new stitching. I spread the linens across the table without a word, smoothing each crease with practiced hands. I could feel the tension in the room thick as smoke. Everyone was afraid, not of the envoy, of what the envoy represented. The Lycan King did not send messengers for pleasantries. He sent them for debts, for judgments, for war. "You missed a fold." The voice came from behind me, silken and sharp. Vivian stood there, arms crossed, her copper hair immaculate, her wolf-bright eyes gleaming with that particular cruelty she reserved for me alone. "Fix it," Vivian said loudly enough for the room to hear. "Or do you need your little moon necklace to help you manage even that?" My hand went instinctively to my chest, to the hidden pendant. I said nothing. I fixed the fold. I always fix the fold. The envoy arrived not at dusk, but at full dark. An insult so precise it could only be deliberate. I watched from the shadowed alcove behind the great hall's side entrance as the massive double doors groaned open and a wall of cold night air rolled through. With it came a scent I had never encountered before. Pine resin and iron, old stone and something deeper. Something animal and electric that made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. 3 figures entered. The first 2 were clearly guards. Towering men in black leather armor, their movements eerily synchronized, their eyes a shade of amber that marked them as pure-blooded lichens. But it was the third figure that pulled every gaze in the room like gravity. He was not the tallest man I had ever seen, but he occupied space differently than anyone I had known. The torchlight seemed to bend around him, shadows pooling at his feet as though drawn there by will alone. He moved with a predatory stillness, each step deliberate as though the ground itself shifted to accommodate him. There was a scar along his left temple, thin and pale, the kind that spoke of a blade that had come very close to something vital and of the creature who had survived it without flinching. His hair was dark cut close at the sides, longer on top. His jaw was carved from something harder than bone. But it was his eyes, gods, his eyes that made me press my back against the stone wall and hold my breath. They were gold, not amber, not hazel, not the tawny glow of a shifted alpha. Pure molten gold like coins heated in a forge. And they swept the great hall with an intelligence that was both human and utterly not. This was no envoy. This was him, the Lichen King, Cade Thornheart himself. A murmur rippled through the gathered pack. Alpha Garrett, who had been seated at the head of the banquet table with the casual authority of a man who ruled everything within his walls, rose slowly. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened before he forced a smile. "Your Majesty," Garrett said, inclining his head, just enough to acknowledge rank without surrendering dominance. "We expected your envoy. We did not dare hope for the honor of your presence." Cade Thornheart said nothing for a long moment. His golden gaze traveled the hall. The banners, the candles, the assembled wolves who would not meet his eyes, and finally settled on Garrett with an expression that I could only describe as bored contempt. "I don't send others to do what requires my own eyes, Alpha Kinsley." His voice was low, resonant, the kind of voice that didn't need volume to command. "Your border reports have been inconsistent. I came to see why." The temperature in the room dropped. I could feel it. Not physically, but in the way every wolf present seemed to shrink inward, their instincts screaming submission in the face of a power that eclipsed anything they had ever known. Garrett's smile didn't waver, but his scent changed. I caught it, a sour note beneath his usual cedar and authority. Fear. My uncle was afraid. "Of course," Garrett said smoothly, "we have prepared a feast in anticipation of your—" "I didn't come to eat." Cade moved toward the table and the wolves nearest to him parted like water. "I came for an accounting. Sit." It was not a request. It was not even a command in the traditional Alpha sense. It was something older, a lichen imperative that bypassed rank entirely and spoke to the wolf inside every person in the room. I watched as my uncle sat down as though his legs had been cut from beneath him, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. The Lichen King took the seat opposite him, not at the foot of the table, directly across, at equal height, as though to say, "I do not need the head of your table to prove who rules here." I knew I should leave. Every survival instinct I'd honed over 12 years screamed at me to slip back through the alcove and disappear into the servants' quarters. But my feet wouldn't move. Something held me. Not fear, not curiosity, but a pull I couldn't name. A tightness in my chest that resonated at the same frequency as the crescent pendant against my skin. I stayed. I watched. And when the Lichen King's golden eyes swept the room once more, they paused. Just for a heartbeat, just for the space of a single breath. On the shadowed alcove where I stood, I felt the world tilt. It was not a look of recognition. It was not desire or anger or even acknowledgement. It was something I had no word for. A lock clicking open somewhere deep inside me. A door I hadn't known existed swinging wide. Then his eyes moved on, and the moment passed, and I pressed my trembling hand against the cold stone wall and told myself I had imagined it. I had not imagined it. The accounting went badly. I could hear it through the stone walls as I worked in the adjacent pantry, pretending to sort grain stores, while my preternatural hearing did what no wolf would believe possible in a wolfless girl. Every word was clear, every shift in tone registered. The Lichen King's questions were surgical. How many rogues had crossed Kinsley borders in the past 6 months? Why had tribute shipments to the Obsidian Throne arrived underweight 3 consecutive seasons? Where were the 12 wolves Garrett had reported as lost to border skirmishes when no neighboring pack had recorded any such engagements? But there was something else woven into his questions, something that made my pulse quicken. He asked about the northern borders specifically, about marks found in the forest, strange marks, burned earth, trees that had died overnight, livestock drained of blood. Shadowborn, I heard him say, and the word fell into the hall like a stone into still water. Garrett's voice when he answered was too smooth, too practiced. We've had no Shadowborn activity in Kinsley territory, Your Majesty. Those are old wives' tales. Superstition. Is that so? A pause. Long enough that I could feel the weight of it even through the wall. Then explain why 3 of my scouts found corruption marks less than a mile from your manor. Fresh marks, no more than a week old. Silence. I'm waiting, Alpha Kinsley. Garrett's deflection was masterful. He spoke of increased patrols, of vigilance, of his pack's strength and loyalty. He turned the conversation to tribute to tradition, to the long alliance between Kinsley wolves and the Obsidian Throne. But his answers didn't satisfy. I could hear it in the silences. The pauses where the Lichen King let Garrett's words hang in the air until their hollowness became obvious. Then the feast began, because Garrett insisted, because refusing a host table carried its own insult, and even a Lichen King observed certain protocols. Wine was poured, platters emerged, and I, because the servants were short-handed and Marta was in tears over a collapsed souffle, was pressed into service carrying a heavy tureen of stew to the main table. I kept my head down. I kept my steps measured. I held the tureen with both hands, its ceramic sides burning through the thin cloth I'd wrapped around my palms. I didn't see Kalen's outstretched foot. The stumble was catastrophic. One moment I was walking, the next the floor tilted and the tureen left my hands and stew scalding, fragrant venison stew, arced through the air and splattered across the white tablecloth in front of my uncle. Silence, the kind of silence that has teeth. I was on my knees, stew soaking into my dress. My palms burned, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my skull. I looked up and saw Kalen smirking from behind his goblet. I saw Vivian covering her mouth to hide her grin. I saw Beta Nash close his eyes in resignation, and I saw my uncle rise from his chair with a face like carved stone. You worthless, wolfless wretch. The words came quiet, almost gentle, which made them worse. Garrett stepped around the table, his boots clicking on the marble floor, and I scrambled backward on my hands, pain forgotten, instinct screaming. Uncle, I'm sorry, I tripped. Please. You embarrass me. He was close now, towering over me, his alpha aura rolling off him in waves that made the other wolves in the room flinch. In front of the Lichen King himself, in my own hall, you dare. It was an accident. The words tore from me before I could stop them, and I knew even as they left my lips that they were a mistake. In Garrett's world, accidents were excuses, and excuses were defiance. And defiance from a wolfless girl was the one thing he could not tolerate. His hand came down fast, open-palmed, full force, a blow that connected with the side of my face and sent me sprawling across the marble. The crack of it echoed through the great hall like a gunshot. Pain exploded through my cheekbone, white-hot and blinding, and I tasted blood. My blood, copper bright, spilling from where my teeth had cut the inside of my cheek. The pendant slipped free from my collar as I fell. It dangled in the open air, the tarnished crescent catching candlelight visible to everyone. I lay on the cold marble blood, dripping from my lip, and felt something inside me, something small and stubborn and ancient, crack like a seed splitting open underground. The marble was ice against my palms. I could taste iron and salt, and the faintest trace of something sweeter beneath. Something that pulsed in my teeth like a second heartbeat. The candlelight above me swam fracturing into starbursts, and for one disorienting moment I thought I heard music. A single crystalline note vibrating somewhere deep in my sternum, beneath bone, beneath breath. Then it was gone, swallowed by the ringing in my ear from my uncle's blow. The hall was frozen. 100 wolves trained from birth to obey the Alpha's will stood or sat in perfect complicit stillness. Some averted their eyes. Others stared with the blank resignation of creatures who had witnessed this scene so many times that horror had calcified into acceptance. No one moved. No one spoke. This was how it was. This was how it had always been. The strong struck. The weak endured. And the pack watched because watching was safer than intervening, and safety was the only currency that mattered in a world ruled by fangs. And then a chair scraped backward with a sound like bone breaking. The Lichen King rose. He did not hurry. He did not shout. He simply stood, and his standing was an act of such terrifying authority that every wolf in the room dropped their gaze to the floor. His gold eyes were no longer bored, they were incandescent, blazing with a fury so pure and ancient that the air itself seemed to vibrate around him. He looked at me on the floor. He looked at the blood on my lip. He looked at the crescent pendant exposed and gleaming. Then he looked at Alpha Garrett Kinsley, and when the Lycan King spoke, his voice was not loud. It was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of every wolf who had ever lived, and it shook the stones of the great hall to their foundation. Touch her again and die. No one breathed. Garrett stood with his hand still half raised, his face cycling through expressions too fast to track. Confusion, offense, calculation, and beneath all of it, a primal animal terror that he could not fully suppress. He was an alpha. He had dominated wolves twice his size through sheer force of will. But what radiated from Cade Thornhart in that moment was not dominance. It was extinction. The promise of it, the proximity of it. "Your Majesty," Garrett began, his voice remarkably steady for a man whose scent was screaming fear. "This girl is my niece. She is wolfless. Pack discipline is a family matter. And I did not ask what she is." Cade stepped forward and Garrett stepped back, an involuntary retreat that every wolf in the room saw. "I told you what will happen if you touch her again. Do you require clarification?" She spilled. "I saw what she did. I also saw the boy trip her." Cade's gold eyes flicked to Kalen, who went the color of old ash. "You didn't see that, did you, Alpha? Or you chose not to?" Garrett's jaw worked. The silence stretched like a wire pulled taut. I remained on the floor, frozen, my cheek throbbing, the pendant dangling over the marble. I could not understand what was happening. The Lycan King, the most feared ruler on the continent, was defending me. A wolfless girl, a servant in her own family's house. It made no sense. Cade turned from Garrett and crossed the distance to where I lay. The gathered wolves parted for him with the instinctive urgency of prey. And then he was there, standing over me, blocking the candlelight, his shadow falling across me like a shield. He extended his hand. I stared at it. His fingers were long, scarred across the knuckles, steady as stone. No one had offered me a hand in 12 years. I had forgotten what the gesture meant. "Up," he said, not a command, an invitation. The gentleness of it, coming from a man who radiated lethality, the way a bonfire radiated heat, was so disorienting that I felt tears sting my eyes. I took his hand. The moment our skin made contact, something happened that I would spend the rest of my life trying to describe. It was not a sound, though it resonated. It was not light, though something blazed behind my closed eyelids. It was a recognition. Bone deep, cellular, older than language. As though every particle in my body suddenly remembered something it had been forced to forget. My pendant blazed hot against my chest. Not painful, alive. Cade felt it too. I saw it in his face, the widening of those gold eyes, the sudden stillness that went beyond his usual predatory composure into something raw and unguarded. His nostrils flared, and I watched him inhale as though tasting the air around me for the first time. "What is your name?" he asked, and his voice had changed. No longer the cold instrument of a king, but something rougher, something fractured at the edges. "Sera, Sera Kinsley." Kinsley. The word fell from his lips like a stone into water. He was still holding my hand. He looked down at the pendant on my chest, the crescent moon tarnished and battered, and something moved behind his expression that I could not read. "Where did you get that?" "My mother gave it to me before she died." "Your mother." He released my hand slowly as though letting go required effort and turned to face Garrett. The fury was still there, but it had deepened, transformed from the hot flash of a protective instinct into something colder and far more dangerous. "This girl's mother," Cade said. "What was her name?" Garrett's face was the color of wet clay. "Alara, my brother's wife. She was Alara Moonvale." The name landed in the room like a detonation. I saw Beta Nash's eyes go wide. I saw old wolves at the far tables exchange glances, loaded with a knowledge I did not share. Even Vivian and Kalen seemed confused, but the elders knew. They remembered. "Moonvale," Cade repeated, "of the Lunaris bloodline, a line we believed extinct for 20 years. His eyes narrowed. "A bloodline, Alpha Kinsley, that is under the direct protection of the Obsidian throne, has been since before your grandfather was born." He took a step closer to Garrett, and I saw my uncle's composure finally crack. "And you have had the last daughter of that line scrubbing your floors." My vision blurred. Lunaris. I had heard my mother whisper the word once late at night in the cadence of a lullaby. I thought it was a fairy tale. I didn't know, Garrett said quickly. Her mother wore this. Kay gestured to the pendant. The crescent of Moonvale. Every lichen knows what it signifies. You are either a liar or a fool, Garrett. In my experience, you are both. The great hall erupted into whispered chaos. I stood in the center of it, blood drying on my chin, my burned hands trembling, the pendant warm against my chest like a second heartbeat, and tried to understand how the world could crack open so completely in the space of a single evening. I was not nothing. I had never been nothing. And the Lichen King knew it before I did. Garrett did not break easily. That was the thing about men who had built their power on cruelty. They had learned to absorb punishment the way their victims had learned to absorb pain. He straightened his shoulders, smoothed his expression, and became once again the polished alpha who had ruled Kinsley territory for 2 decades. Your Majesty, he said, and his voice carried the reasonable tone of a man negotiating, not surrendering. Whatever the girl's maternal bloodline may be, she manifested no wolf at her coming of age. She is by every measure our traditions recognize wolfless. He paused, letting the words settle over the assembled pack. The Lunaris bloodline, if it persists in her, is dormant at best, extinct at worst. Surely the protection of the obsidian throne extends to those who carry the power, not merely the name. It was a clever argument. I could see how it landed with the pack, the subtle nods. The way wolves who had just been horrified by the Lunaris revelation began to relax. Garrett was giving them permission to return to the familiar hierarchy. I was still wolfless. I was still less. Nothing had really changed. Cade Thornhart studied Garrett the way a predator studies the precise angle of a kill. You have an interesting interpretation of bloodline law, Alpha Kinsley. Let me offer mine. He turned to face the assembled pack, and his voice, though never raised, filled every corner of the vaulted hall. Lunaris wolves are rare, rarer than any of you understand. Their gifts do not manifest the way a common wolf's does. They do not shift at 13 and howl at the moon. Their power is different, deeper. His gold eyes found me. It wakes in its own time, and it wakes in response to need. A pause, or in response to recognition. My pendant pulsed. I felt it, unmistakable, rhythmic, like a heartbeat synchronizing with my own. The crescent shape seemed to warm from the center outward, and a tingling sensation spread from my chest through my limbs, settling behind my eyes like the first light of dawn. She is wolfless, Garrett insisted, but his voice had thinned. I've had her tested. 3 different. Your testers looked for the wrong wolf. Cade's lip curled, and for one moment I saw the beast beneath the man, the flash of elongated canines, the ridge of muscle along his jaw that shouldn't have been there in human form. A Lunaris wolf does not howl. It sings, and it has been singing in this girl since the day she was born. The fact that you silenced it is a crime I will address at length. The word crime changed the room. Beta Nash shifted nervously, his hand moving to his throat in an unconscious gesture of submission. The elders at the back tables went rigid, their faces carved from decades of complicity and carefully maintained ignorance. 2 of them, old wolves who had served Garrett's father before him, exchanged a look that carried the weight of a confession neither would ever speak aloud. Vivian, for the first time in my memory, looked genuinely frightened. Not for her father, I realized. For herself. For the crumbling of a hierarchy that had placed her above everyone and taught her that cruelty was the same as strength. Garrett, however, chose escalation. It was what he always did when cornered. Push harder. Hit harder. Make the cost of opposition so high that surrender seemed like wisdom. With respect, Your Majesty. He stepped forward, reclaiming ground. You come to my territory unannounced, disrupt my court, level accusations based on a piece of tarnished jewelry. And now you claim authority over a member of my pack, my family. His voice rose and his alpha aura surged, a deliberate challenge, reckless and desperate. Even the Lichen King must respect the sovereignty of sovereignty. Cade didn't move, but the air around him changed. It thickened. It pressed. I watched wolves at the nearest tables grab the edges of their seats, their faces draining of color as the Lichen imperative expanded outward like a shockwave. You speak to me of sovereignty while your niece's blood dries on your hall floor, while she wears bruises older than tonight under that dress. I flinched. I hadn't told anyone about the other marks. The ones on my arms, my ribs. The ones that faded yellow before fresh ones replaced them. But he knew. Somehow, impossibly, he knew. I want an accounting of every wolf in Kinsley territory. Cade continued, his voice dropping to a register that made the stone floor vibrate. I want financial records for the past 10 years. And I want this girl removed from your custody and placed under the protection of the obsidian throne. Tonight. You cannot, I can. Cade's eyes blazed golden. For one terrible, awe-inspiring moment, his form seemed to ripple, as though the beast inside him pressed against the boundary of his skin, yearning to break free. I am doing it now. Oppose me and I will not need a tribunal. I will end your line myself in this hall, before your pack bears witness. A pause that felt like the world holding its breath. That is not a threat, Garrett. It is a promise from a creature far older and far less patient than you have calculated. The hall held its breath, and Alpha Garrett Kinsley, who had never bent his knee to anyone, looked into the Lycan King's eyes and saw his own death staring back at him. He sat down. They gave me a room in the East Wing, the guest quarters reserved for visiting dignitaries. Clean sheets and a fireplace and a window that looked out over the moonlit forest. I stood in the center of it and did not know what to do with myself. The room was larger than the entire servants' alcove I had slept in for 12 years. The bed had pillows, plural. A healer came, an older Lycan woman named Mira who traveled with Cade's guard and who examined my injuries with gentle, efficient hands and a grim expression that deepened with every bruise she cataloged. 14, Mira said quietly, wrapping my burned palms in salve-soaked linen. 14 separate sites of trauma in various stages of healing. Some of these are weeks old. Some are months. I said nothing. I had learned that silence was safer than explanation, that describing the details only made them more real. Mira finished her work and left. I sat on the edge of the absurdly soft bed, my hands bandaged my pendant warm against my chest and stared at the fire. I tried to feel safe. I couldn't. Safety was an abstract concept, something that happened to other people. People with wolves and families and names that didn't sound like insults when spoken aloud. A knock at the door. I opened it to find Cade Thornhart standing in the corridor, alone. He had removed the formal coat he'd worn in the Great Hall. In just a dark shirt and trousers, he looked less like a king and more like a man, albeit one who radiated a quiet, controlled intensity that made the air around him feel like the moment before lightning. "May I speak with you?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He entered the room and stood by the window, keeping distance between us. Deliberate, I realized. Thoughtful. "What you learned tonight," he began, "about your mother's bloodline. I know it's overwhelming. I don't understand any of it." The words came before I could filter them, raw and honest. Lunaris. Moonveil. My mother, she was a healer. She grew herbs. She sang to me. She was extraordinary. Cade's voice softened in a way that seemed to surprise even him. Lunaris wolves are not just rare. They are sacred. Where other wolves carry the gift of the shift, Lunaris wolves carry the gift of resonance, the ability to attune to the emotional and spiritual frequency of every living thing around them. He turned from the window to face me. Your mother would have been an empath of astonishing power. And you, a pause. You have been hearing things, feeling things, sensing things you could not explain. Haven't you? The tears came before I could stop them. Years of it, years of hearing heartbeats through walls, of smelling emotions like weather, of knowing when someone was lying or hurting or afraid, and being told I was nothing. Defective. Hollow. I thought I was broken, I whispered. You are the opposite of broken. He stepped closer, one step, carefully measured. Your wolf is not absent, Sera. It is a Lunaris wolf. It does not manifest through shift. It manifests through attunement, and it has been awake in you since before you knew its name. The pendant blazed. I gasped, pressing my hand to my chest. The warmth was spreading through my ribs, down my arms into my fingertips. And with it came a sound, not audible, not external, a vibration deep inside me, like a note struck on a crystal glass, pure and resonant and climbing. My wolf, not a howl, a song. There it is, Cade breathed. He was watching me with an expression I could not decipher. Reverence, maybe? Or grief? Or some emotion that lived in the space between the two. The Lunaris song. I haven't heard one in 20 years, not since your mother. You knew my mother. I knew of her. I searched for her when the Moonveil line went quiet. By the time I traced her to Kinsley territory, she was already gone. His jaw tightened. And you were already buried in this house. I should have come sooner. I should have looked harder. The raw guilt in his voice cracked something open in me. Here was the most powerful being on the continent, and he was standing in a guest room apologizing to a girl who had scrubbed floors for 12 years. The disconnect between his power and his vulnerability in this moment was so vast that I didn't know whether to laugh or collapse. It's not your fault, I said. It is. The Lycan King's duty is to protect every wolf under the obsidian throne, especially the Lunaris. His gold eyes held mine. I failed. I won't fail again. The song inside my chest swelled, warm, clear, king with something that felt dangerously like hope. I touched the pendant. It hummed beneath my fingers like a living thing. My mother said this carries what they cannot take from me, I said. I never understood what she meant. Your birthright, Kate said. Your voice. Your place in a lineage that predates every alpha in this land. A pause. You are not wolfless, Sera. You never were. And by tomorrow, every wolf in Kinsley territory will know it. I looked at the fire. I looked at the Lycan King. I looked at my bandaged hands. And for the first time in 12 years, I did not feel small. But the night was not finished with us. It came at the darkest hour, between midnight and dawn, when even wolves sleep. The scream tore through Kinsley Manor like a blade through silk. I was out of bed before I was fully awake, the Lunaris song rising instinctively in my chest, my senses suddenly hyper-alert. Footsteps thundered in the corridors, shouts, the clash of steel. I threw open my door to find chaos. A Lycan guard sprinted past, sword-drawn, blood on his armor. Not his blood. Stay in your room, he barked without stopping. But I couldn't. The song inside me was pulling, screaming. Something was wrong. Something was hunting. I ran barefoot down the corridor toward the great hall, my nightgown streaming behind me. The smell hit me first, rot and smoke and something beneath. Something that made my wolf recoil in primal recognition. Corruption. I rounded the corner and froze. The great hall had become a battlefield. 3 creatures moved through the space like living nightmares. They had the basic shape of wolves, but wrong, elongated, twisted. Their fur was matted and black, shot through with veins of sickly red light that pulsed like diseased heartbeats. Their eyes were empty sockets filled with smoke. Shadowborn. Cade was there, partially shifted, gold eyes blazing, claws extended. His movements were impossibly fast, a blur of controlled violence, as he engaged the largest of the creatures. 2 Lycan guards fought the other 2. One guard was already down, clutching a wound that smoked and hissed. The Shadowborn moved wrong. Too fast, too fluid, as though gravity didn't fully apply to them. One of them saw me. Its eyeless head swiveled, smoke curling from the empty sockets, and it changed direction. Away from the guard it had been fighting. Toward me. Toward the Lunaris. Time slowed. I saw its jaws open, rows of teeth like shattered glass. I saw the red veins in its fur pulse brighter. I heard Cade roar my name, and then the pendant against my chest erupted. Not with heat, with light. Silver light that blazed outward like a star-going nova. The Shadowborn creature hit an invisible barrier 3 feet from me and was thrown backward. It slammed into a stone column hard enough to crack the marble. The impact didn't kill it, but it stunned it. Long enough, Cade was there in the space between heartbeats. His clawed hand drove through the creature's chest, found something vital, and ripped. The Shadowborn dissolved into smoke and ash, leaving only the stench of corruption behind. The remaining 2 creatures saw what had happened. They saw the light still radiating from my pendant, and they did something I didn't expect. They fled, not through the doors, through the shadows themselves. One moment they were there, the next they had melted into darkness and were gone. The hall fell silent except for ragged breathing and the crackle of disturbed torches. I was on my knees. I didn't remember falling. The pendant's light was fading, but my chest felt like it had been hollowed out. Every breath was an effort. Cade was at my side instantly, his partial shift receding his hands on my shoulders. Sera, look at me. Are you hurt? I shook my head, though I wasn't sure that was true. I felt empty, drained, as though something had poured out of me when the light blazed. What were those things? I managed. Shadowborn, Cade said grimly. Corrupted wolves. They served something ancient and evil. Something that should have stayed buried. He looked at the ash pile where the creature had dissolved then at my pendant. They were hunting you, specifically you. Why? Because Lunaris wolves are their natural enemy. Your song, your light, it's poison to them. It can heal corruption, reverse it, destroy them permanently. He helped me to my feet, his hands steady on my arms. Which means they'll try again. Whoever sent them knows you're here. Knows you're awakening. Beta Nash appeared in the doorway, sword drawn, face pale. Your Majesty, the perimeter is secure. No other breaches. But we found... He hesitated. We found marks in the North Forest. Fresh corruption marks leading toward the manor. Cade's expression went cold. How many? At least a dozen tracks, maybe more. They were probing our defenses. And Garrett knew. It wasn't a question. Nash's silence was answer enough. Cade turned back to me, and in his eyes I saw something that made my stomach drop. Not just anger, fear. For me. We're leaving, he said, before dawn. It's not safe here. Not anymore. We're the Obsidian Citadel. It's the only place protected enough. The only place where I can keep you alive while you learn to control your power. He glanced at the ash pile again. Because that light you just created, that was raw, untrained Lunaris force. It saved your life tonight. But if you don't learn to harness it to shield it, every Shadowborn within 100 miles will feel your awakening like a beacon. A pause. And they will come for you. All of them. I looked down at my pendant, still warm, still humming. The tarnish was gone from one edge where the light had burned brightest. Beneath, silver gleamed. How long do we have? I asked. Hours, maybe less. The scouts we killed tonight were just probing. But their master has been marching since the Moonveil massacre. He's been hunting you for 18 years, Sera. The moment your pendant blazed, he knew, and he was already close. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. The real threat was coming. Dawn came too fast and not fast enough. I was given traveling clothes. Practical, warm, a far cry from the threadbare servant's dress I'd worn my entire life. Mira packed my few belongings, including my mother's pendant, which I refused to take off. The great hall was being transformed as I descended the stairs. The banquet tables had been pushed aside. In their place, a single wooden chair sat in the center of the open floor. And facing it on a raised dais that Cade's guards had constructed in the night was a seat of dark stone, the portable judgment seat of the obsidian throne. Cade sat in it like he'd been born there. His lichen guards flanked him still and expressionless, but it was the other presence that stopped me in the doorway. Wolves, not just Kinsley wolves, wolves from neighboring territories who had arrived before dawn, summoned by lichen messengers during the night. The hall was packed, standing room only, and every face carried the taut awareness of creatures witnessing something historic. Sera, Cade's voice cut through the murmur. Come forward. I walked. Every eye in the room followed me, and I felt their attention like heat. Curiosity, hostility, pity, wonder. The bruise on my cheek had deepened overnight, a dark bloom that I had not tried to hide. They need to witness this, the song urged. I stopped before the dais. Cade looked at me once, and in his gaze I found something steady, an anchor point in the chaos. Alpha Garrett Kinsley, Cade called. Approach. Asana, owned. Garrett emerged from the crowd. He had dressed immaculately. Ceremonial alpha garb, the Kinsley crest polished on his chest, but his eyes were hollow with sleeplessness, in the particular desperation of a man who had spent all night calculating odds and finding none in his favor. He stood before the judgment seat and did not bow. You stand accused, Cade began, of 3 violations of lichen sovereign law. His voice carried to every corner of the hall. First, the concealment of a Lunaris-blooded wolf from the obsidian throne. Second, the systematic abuse and subjugation of a protected bloodline. Third, the falsification of border reports and tribute records to defraud the lichen crown. Murmurs rolled through the crowd. How do you answer? I answer, Garrett said, his voice controlled, that I acted within the rights of an alpha governing his own pack. The girl showed no wolf. No alpha in the continental territories would have treated her differently. That, Cade said, is precisely the problem. What followed was not a spectacle. It was a dismantling. One by one, Cade called witnesses, servants who had seen the beatings, who had cleaned blood from floors, who had heard my cries through stone walls and done nothing because doing nothing was survival. Pack elders who had known my mother's heritage and said nothing, who had recognized the Moonveil crescent around my neck and chosen blindness over action. Beta Nash, who admitted under the weight of the lichen imperative that Garrett had ordered border reports doctored, that tribute shipments had been skimmed, that wolves reported as lost to skirmishes had actually been Shadowborn kills, that Garrett covered up to avoid lichen scrutiny. And then Nash said something that made the room go cold. The Shadowborn tracks we found this morning, they weren't the first. We've been finding corruption marks for months. Alpha Kinsley ordered us to burn the evidence, to say nothing. Cade's eyes narrowed. Did he say why? Nash's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said the Shadowborn weren't a threat, as long as we gave them no reason to attack, as long as we didn't interfere. Interfere with what? With them hunting. The word fell into the hall like a stone into deep water. Hunting what, Beta? Nash looked at me, just once, and I understood. Lunaris bloodlines, he said. They're hunting anyone with Lunaris blood. Alpha Kinsley knew. He kept Sera hidden, kept her wolfless. He thought if she never awakened, they'd pass her by. The crowd erupted, shouts of outrage, disbelief, horror. Garrett's face was white. Cade stood. The room went silent. You knew Shadowborn were hunting on your territory. You knew they were searching for the last Lunaris daughter, and instead of protecting her, you ensured she would never awaken, never defend herself. He descended from the dais, each step deliberate. You didn't just abuse her, you offered her up as prey. I kept her alive, Garrett hissed. If she'd awakened, they would have killed her. Killed all of us. No, Cade said softly. You kept yourself alive, at her expense. He turned to face the assembled wolves. Alpha Garrett Kinsley, you are stripped of your title and your territory. Kinsley lands are placed under Lycan stewardship until a worthy successor is named. His voice hardened. You and your direct collaborators will be escorted to the Obsidian Citadel to stand full tribunal. The traditional penalty for what you have done is death. I am granting you a tribunal instead. He paused. Consider carefully who you thank for that mercy. His eyes moved to me. The room understood. Then something unexpected happened. Vivian stepped forward from the crowd. Her face was streaked with tears, her copper hair disheveled. She looked nothing like the immaculate, cruel girl who had mocked me the day before. Your Majesty, she said, her voice breaking. I need to speak. Cade's gaze settled on her. Speak. My father, Vivian's hands were shaking. He didn't just abuse Sera. He taught us that weakness deserved punishment. That power was everything. But last night when Sera's song filled the hall, during her testimony, I felt... She looked at me and in her eyes I saw genuine remorse. I felt what she's endured. Every blow, every insult, every moment of terror. And I realized I was just like him. I hurt her because I was too much of a coward to stop him from hurting me. The hall was silent. I don't expect forgiveness, Vivian continued, but I want to be better. I want to serve the Citadel, to learn what it means to have strength without cruelty. Cade looked at me, a silent question. I thought about 12 years of torment, about Vivian's mocking laughter, about the fold she'd made me fix, but I also thought about the fear in her eyes right now, the courage it took to confess in front of everyone. She can come, I said quietly, if she means it. Vivian's breath hitched. She bowed deep and formal. Thank you. Garrett was escorted out by Lycan guards. No chains, but no dignity either. As he passed me, he looked at me. I expected hatred. I expected contempt. What I saw instead was something worse. The blank incomprehension of a man who genuinely could not understand what he had done wrong. I watched him go, and I felt the song in my chest ache with a sorrow that was not for him, but for the years I had spent believing that his voice was the truth, that his cruelty was correction, that his silence was discipline, that the bruises he left were the natural consequence of being born wrong. I ached for the child I had been, the girl who pressed a tarnished pendant to her lips each night and prayed to a mother who could no longer answer. But grief, I was learning, was not the opposite of strength. It was the soil in which strength grew. Cade stepped down from the dais and crossed to where I stood. The room was emptying now, wolves filtering out in stunned silence. And for a moment it was just the two of us in the great hall where my blood had stained the marble the night before. What happens to me now, I asked. That, Cade said, is entirely up to you. I looked at the pendant. Its glow had settled to a soft, constant light. Not tarnished anymore, but not blazing either. Steady, warm, like me. I want to learn, I said, what I am, what the Lunaris song can do. I want to understand my mother's legacy. Then you will. Cade hesitated, and for one unguarded moment, the savage Lycan king looked almost uncertain. The Obsidian Citadel has archives older than any pack. Tutors who remember the Lunaris at their height. And a king. A pause. Who will ensure that no one silences your voice again? I stood. I did not bow. Not because I was defiant, but because I understood now that I didn't need to. I extended my hand the way he had extended his the night before. He took it. The song swelled, and the crescent pendant, warm against my heart, gleamed like a small, steady moon rising. The road to the Obsidian Citadel cut through the heart of the Wyoming wilderness like a scar through stone. We traveled fast, stopping only when the horses demanded it, pushing through terrain that would have broken lesser riders. Cade rode beside me, his presence a constant shield. Two Lycan guards flanked us, their amber eyes scanning the tree line with predatory focus. Mira followed in a supply wagon, her healing kit never far from reach. Vivienne rode near the back, silent, her eyes red from crying. We didn't speak much during those first hours. There was too much to say, and no words large enough to hold it. But as the sun climbed toward noon, and the pines began to thin, revealing glimpses of distant mountains, Cade broke the silence. "Your mother," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Alara, I need you to understand something." I looked at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the horizon. 26 years ago, when I was 6 years old, the Lycan throne made a pact with the Moonveil bloodline, a promise of protection in exchange for alliance. I was betrothed to your mother as a child, a political arrangement between powers. My breath caught. You were supposed to marry her. I was, but 20 years ago, everything changed. The Shadowborn, we thought they were legend, old stories to frighten young wolves. Then they came, not as individuals, as an army. His hands tightened on the reins. They attacked the Moonveil stronghold in a single night, slaughtered everyone. Your mother escaped because she was visiting a neighboring pack. By the time I got word, by the time I could mobilize forces, the Moonveil line was ash. He turned to look at me, and the pain in his gold eyes was raw. I searched for her. For 2 years I searched. I finally traced her to Kinsley territory, but she'd married your father by then, changed her name, hidden herself so completely that even I couldn't find her until it was too late. She was protecting me, I whispered. She was, from the same enemy that's coming for you now. Voreth led that attack. He's been hunting Lunaris bloodlines for centuries, trying to exterminate them completely. Why? Because you're the only thing that can kill him permanently. The Lunaris song doesn't just repel Shadowborn. It can unmake them, reverse the corruption, destroy the source. Cade's eyes blazed gold. Your mother could have ended him. If she'd lived long enough to reach her full power, she would have. That's why he hunted her. That's why he poisoned her slowly rather than killing her outright. He wanted her to suffer, to die without ever knowing what she could have been. The song inside me trembled. Not with fear, with fury. And now he knows I exist. Yes, and he knows you're awakening. When your pendant created that barrier, every Shadowborn within 100 miles felt it. It was like a beacon, a declaration. He looked ahead to where the mountains rose like jagged teeth against the sky. He's coming, Sera, with everything he has, and we have perhaps a day to prepare you for a war your mother never got to fight. We reached the Obsidian Citadel as the sun began its descent toward the western peaks. The fortress rose from the granite cliffs like it had been carved from the mountain itself. Massive, ancient, beautiful and brutal in equal measure. Black stone towers stretched toward the sky, their surfaces etched with symbols I didn't recognize. Torches burned in iron sconces along walls that had stood for 1,000 years. This was the seat of Lycan power, the throne from which Cade ruled the entire continent. And for the next day, it would be my home, my training ground, my battlefield. Guards opened the massive gates as we approached. Wolves lined the courtyard, their faces a mix of curiosity and wariness. They knew who I was. Word had traveled faster than horses. The last Lunaris, the girl who could end the Shadowborn threat or die trying. Cade dismounted first, then helped me down. My legs were unsteady after hours in the saddle, but I forced myself to stand straight, to meet their gazes. A figure emerged from the main keep, ancient beyond measure. His human form had taken on the translucent quality of parchment held before a candleskin, so thin I could see the veins beneath. But his eyes pale as winter ice held a sharpness that belied his appearance. Silas, Cade said, and there was deep respect in his voice. This is Sera Kinsley, daughter of Alara Moonveil, the last Lunaris. Silas studied me with those ice chip eyes, not unkindly but with an intensity that made me feel like he was reading every secret I'd ever held. I knew your mother, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying perfect clarity. I was her tutor before the fall. She had the most beautiful song I'd ever heard. He stepped closer and I smelled pine and old parchment and something else, something that reminded me of moonlight on still water. Let me hear yours, child. I didn't know how. I didn't know what he was asking, but the pendant against my chest warmed and the song rose without conscious thought. Not loud, not forceful, just there. A vibration that moved through the courtyard like wind through leaves. Every wolf present went still. Some closed their eyes, Others swayed slightly, as though the frequency had found something inside them and gently shifted it into alignment. Silas smiled. It transformed his ancient face into something almost young. "Oh yes," he breathed. "She's here. The song remembers." He turned to Cade. "You said we have a day. Perhaps less. Varath won't wait." "Then we begin now. There's no time for gentle instruction. She must learn to shield, to amplify, and to strike. The Lunaris song is not just a gift, Your Majesty. It is a weapon, and this girl must become a master of it or die in the attempt." The training room was deep in the heart of the citadel. A circular chamber carved from black stone, its walls inscribed with the same strange symbols I'd seen outside. Torches burned in wall sconces, but they gave off silver light instead of gold. "Moonfire," Silas explained, seeing my expression. "It responds to Lunaris frequency. As you grow stronger, they'll burn brighter." He positioned me in the center of the circle. "The Lunaris wolf does not dominate," he said, beginning to circle me slowly. "It harmonizes. Where the alpha commands you attune, where the beta enforces you bridge. Your gift is not power over others. It is understanding of them. Deep cellular understanding that allows you to heal what is fractured and strengthen what is fragile." "But you said I need to learn to strike," I said. "Yes, because understanding can also reveal weakness. The song that heals can also destroy. It is the same for Sera, the same frequency. The difference is intention." He stopped in front of me. "Shadowborn are wolves corrupted by ancient darkness. Their natural frequency is disrupted, inverted, twisted into something that feeds on fear and pain. Your song is the opposite. Hope, connection, light. When a Lunaris song encounters a Shadowborn, one of two things happens." He held up a finger. "Either your song is strong enough to reverse the corruption, to heal them back to their original state. A second finger. Or the Shadowborn's corruption is strong enough to overwhelm you, to silence your song and consume you utterly." The torches flickered. There is no middle ground, no stalemate. When Lunaris and Shadowborn meet, one survives. The other does not. I swallowed hard. How do I make sure I'm the one who survives? "You learn to control the amplitude, the focus, the intention behind every note." Silas gestured to the inscribed walls. "These symbols are tuning markers. They'll help you feel the frequency, see it manifest." "Close your eyes." I did. "Now sing, not with your voice, with your wolf. Let the song rise." I reached for the vibration inside me. The one that had saved me from the Shadowborn in Kinsley Manor. The one that had blazed from my pendant like starlight. It came easier this time, as though it had been waiting just beneath my skin, ready to surface. The song filled the chamber. "Good," Silas murmured. "Now open your eyes, but keep singing." I opened them and gasped. The silver torches were blazing, brighter than before. And the inscribed symbols on the walls were glowing, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat, with the song. You see, the song is not abstract. It is real. It is measurable, and it can be shaped. He moved to one of the symbols, placed his hand on it. "This one represents amplification. Focus your song here, pour it into the symbol, and see what happens." I tried. The song was everywhere, diffuse, filling the space like water fills a bowl. "Focus," Silas said sharply. "You are not a river. You are an arrow. Choose your target and strike." I gritted my teeth. Imagine the song not as a wave, but as a beam. Directed it toward the symbol where Silas's hand rested. The symbol blazed white hot. The torch nearest to it exploded in a shower of silver sparks. Silas stepped back, nodding. "Better, but uncontrolled. You need precision, not just power." Again. We worked for hours, until my legs shook, until the song felt like broken glass in my throat, until I could direct the frequency to a single point, no larger than a coin, and hold it there without wavering. "Enough," Silas said finally. "You're burning out. Rest. We continue in 4 hours." 4 hours, that's not... "We have perhaps a day, child, and Vorath has been perfecting the art of killing Lunaris wolves for 300 years. 4 hours of rest is generous." I collapsed in the chambers they'd given me, larger than the guest room at Kinsley Manor. Windows that overlooked the mountains, a bed that felt like clouds. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Shadowborn, smoke-filled sockets, jaws like broken glass, and behind them a figure I'd never seen but could somehow sense. Vorath, ancient, patient, coming. A knock at the door. Cade entered without waiting for permission. He took one look at me and crossed the room in 3 strides. "You should be sleeping." "I can't." He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Silas is pushing you hard. Not hard enough. I can barely hold the song for 10 minutes before I start to shake. How am I supposed to face an army? You're not. Cade's voice was firm. You're supposed to face Vorath. My forces will handle the army. Your job is to end him. Permanently. And if I can't, his gold eyes found mine in the dim light, then I will die making sure he doesn't leave this citadel alive. And so will every wolf within these walls. We all know what's at stake. The weight of it crashed over me. Hundreds of lives, thousands, all depending on a girl who'd spent 12 years scrubbing floors. I'm not ready, I whispered. Cade's hand covered mine. The touch sent the familiar recognition blazing through me. Bone deep, cellular. Your mother wasn't ready either when the Shadowborn came for her, but she fought anyway. She gave you life, gave you time, gave you this. He touched the pendant at my throat. And now you have something she never had. You have me. You have Silas. You have warriors who will stand between you and death until the last breath leaves their bodies. His hand moved to cup my face gentle, despite the claws I knew lived just beneath his skin. You are not alone, Sera. Not anymore. The song swelled, not as a weapon, as something softer, something that ached. Cade, a horn blast shattered the moment. Long, low, the sound of warning. Cade was on his feet instantly, every muscle coiled. Another blast, then another. That's the Northern Watch, he said grimly. They're here. But you said we had a day. I was wrong, or he moved faster than I calculated. He moved to the window and I followed. In the distance, past the walls, past the cleared ground that surrounded the citadel, the forest was burning. Not with natural fire. With the sickly red light I'd seen pulsing through the Shadowborn's veins. And between the trees, shapes moved. Hundreds of them. Thousands. An army of smoke and corruption flowing toward the citadel like a plague tide. He didn't wait, Cade breathed. He brought everything. Every corrupted wolf, every creature he's turned in 3 centuries of hunting. He turned to me, and the fear I'd seen earlier was gone, replaced by something colder, something absolute. The battle begins tonight, whether you're ready or not. The citadel transformed into a war fortress in minutes. Wolves poured onto the walls, weapons in hand. Archers took positions on the towers. The massive gates were reinforced with beams of ironwood, blessed by ancient rites. I stood on the ramparts beside Cade Silas on my other side and watched the Shadowborn army approach. They moved like a single organism, flowing, undulating, the red veins in their twisted forms pulsing in synchronized rhythm. And at their head, a figure that made every wolf on the wall take an involuntary step back. Vorath, he was massive. Not in the way a large wolf is massive, but in the way a mountain is massive. Presence more than size. He walked on 4 legs, but his form shifted constantly, as though he couldn't quite decide whether to be wolf or something else. Something worse. His fur was black, shot through with veins of red so bright they looked like wounds. His eyes were not empty sockets like the lesser Shadowborn. They were filled with fire. Ancient, malevolent, aware. He stopped at the edge of bow range and sat. And then he spoke, his voice carried across the distance like thunder rolling through a valley. Deep, resonant, wrong. Little moon, he said, and I felt the words like fingers on my spine. Your mother sang so beautifully when she died. I still hear her screams in my dreams. They comfort me. Cade's growl was purely animal. Will you sing for me too, Vorath continued. Will you light up the darkness like she did? Or will you be smart? Will you come down from those walls and accept what has always been inevitable? Don't listen to him, Silas hissed. He's trying to shake you, to make you doubt. He killed my mother. Yes, and he wants you to attack and rage, to burn yourself out before the real battle begins. Don't give him the satisfaction. But the song inside me wasn't listening to Silas. It was rising. Hot, furious, demanding release. My pendant blazed. The silver torches along the wall erupted into pillars of white light, and every Shadowborn in the army recoiled, hissing as the Lunaris frequency washed over them like a wave. Vorath's laughter was the sound of bones breaking. There it is, the song, weak, untrained, delicious. He rose to his feet. I'm going to enjoy breaking you, little moon, just like I broke your mother, slowly, until all that light inside you turns to ash. The army surged forward. Archers, Cade roared. Loose, 1,000 arrows filled the sky, most of them wrapped in blessed cloth, some burning with oil. They fell among the Shadowborn like deadly rain. Some of the corrupted wolves fell, but most kept coming, the arrows passing through their smoke forms without slowing them. They're not fully corporeal, Silas said urgently. Physical weapons won't stop them all. You have to, I know. I stepped forward to the edge of the wall, placed my hands on the stone, let the pendant blaze at full strength. The song erupted from me, not carefully directed, not precisely controlled, just everything. Every note, every frequency, a tidal wave of light and sound that crashed over the Shadowborn army like the wrath of gods. Dozens of them dissolved instantly, smoke and ash scattering on the wind. But it cost me. I felt something inside me tear. The song stuttered, flickered, and I fell to my knees gasping. Too much, Silas snapped, catching me. You can't just pour everything out at once. You'll burn out before the real fight begins. Then teach me, I shouted. You said I had a day. I have minutes. Below, the Shadowborn had reached the walls. They weren't climbing. They were melting into the stone itself, emerging on our side like ghosts passing through barriers. Lycan warriors engaged them in brutal close combat. Steel met smoke, claws met shadow, wolves fell on both sides. And through it all, Vorath sat at the edge of the battlefield and watched, waiting for me. He's not going to engage, Cade said, reading my thoughts. Not yet. He'll let his army wear us down first, exhaust you. Then he'll come. So what do I do? Cade looked at Silas. Some silent communication passed between them. You do what your mother never got the chance to do, Silas said quietly. You learn on the battlefield. You adapt or you die. And you trust that the song knows things you don't, things that live deeper than conscious thought. He gripped my shoulders. The symbols on the walls, inside the citadel, they're not just for training, they're amplification matrices, old Lunaris magic built into the foundation stones. If you can connect to them, use them as a network, you can shield the entire fortress without burning yourself out. How? The same way you directed the song to a single symbol in the training room. But larger, much larger, you have to attune to the entire citadel, make it an extension of yourself. That's impossible. So was surviving 12 years with a Lunaris song hidden inside you. So was creating that barrier in Kinsley Manor. So was everything you've already done. Silas released me. Your mother would have been proud. Now prove her sacrifice wasn't in vain. He stepped back, leaving me alone on the rampart. Below, the battle raged. Above, stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. And somewhere in the distance, Vorath's laughter echoed like a promise of pain. I steadied my breathing, reached for the song buried in my bones, and let it loose. Not with my voice, with everything. Every cell, every breath, every memory of my mother's lullabies and the pendant's warmth, and the way Cade's hand had felt when he pulled me up from the marble floor. The song spread through me, through the stone beneath my feet, through the ancient symbols carved into black granite by Lunaris wolves who had stood where I stood, fought what I fought, died, so their descendants could live. I felt them, all of them, generations of singers whose voices had been silenced, but whose frequency remained embedded in the very bones of the citadel. And they sang with me. The fortress blazed with silver light, every symbol, every stone, every window and wall and tower erupting into luminescence that turned night into day. The Shadowborn army screamed. A shield of pure Lunaris frequency snapped into place around the citadel. Invisible but absolute. Where it touched corrupted flesh, smoke dissolved. Where it intersected dark magic, the magic shattered. Dozens more Shadowborn fell. Then hundreds. The army broke, retreated, fleeing back toward the forest and the darkness they'd emerged from. All except one. Vorath stood, and for the first time I heard something in his voice besides mockery. Respect. Well done, little moon. You're stronger than she was at your age. This will be fun after all. He melted into shadow and was gone. The battlefield fell silent except for the moans of wounded wolves and the crackle of dying fires. I collapsed. Silas caught me before I hit the stone. You did it, he breathed. You actually did it. For how long? I managed. Until your strength gives out. Hours maybe, maybe less. Cade was there, kneeling beside me. How many did we lose? I asked. His expression was grim. 43 dead, twice that wounded, but you saved hundreds more. That shield you created. He looked at the glowing walls. It's holding them back, buying us time. Time for what? For you to rest, to recover, because Vorath won't wait long. As if in answer, a howl rose from the forest. Not a wolf's howl, something older, something that made the stars themselves seem to dim. Vorath's challenge. And beneath it, words that only I could hear carried on a frequency that bypassed sound entirely and spoke directly to my wolf. Tomorrow night, little moon, You and me, no armies, no shields, just the song and the shadow. And we'll see which one devours the other. I looked at Cade. He's challenged me to single combat. You don't have to accept. We can. There is no we can, I said quietly. This is why I'm here. Why my mother died protecting me. Why the Lunaris bloodline has been hunted for centuries. I stood shakily, but I stood. Tomorrow night I end this, one way or another. The pendant pulsed against my chest, and somewhere deep inside beneath fear and exhaustion, the song began to prepare for war. They carried me to my chambers. I wanted to protest, to insist I could walk, but my legs wouldn't support me. The shield had drained something fundamental, and my body knew it, even if my pride didn't. Mira was waiting. She laid me on the bed and worked in silence, checking my pulse, my breathing, the color of my skin. The shield, she said finally. It's still active. You're maintaining it even unconscious. Is that bad? Kate asked from the doorway. It's unprecedented. Lunaris wolves in the old text could sustain shields for hours, but never while depleted. Never while their bodies were screaming for rest. She looked at me with something like awe. She's not just channeling the Citadel's amplification network. She's become part of it. The stones are singing with her. Will she survive tomorrow? Mira's silence was answer enough. I wanted to tell them I was awake, that I could hear every word, but sleep pulled at me like an undertow and I let it take me. I dreamed of my mother. She stood in a field of silver grass beneath a moon so bright it hurt to look at. Her hair was dark like mine, her eyes the same shape, but where mine were brown, hers were the pale blue of winter ice. Little moon, she said, and her voice was the song. Not singing it, being it. Mom, you've grown so strong, stronger than I ever was. I don't feel strong, I feel terrified. She smiled, sad and proud in equal measure. Terror and strength are not opposites, Sera. They're companions. The wolf who feels no fear has nothing worth protecting. She knelt in the silver grass and beckoned me closer. Tomorrow you'll face him, the creature who took me from you, who poisoned me slowly so I'd never reach my full power. I know, Cade told me. Cade, her smile widened. He was such a serious boy when they betrothed us. All duty and responsibility. I'm glad he found you. Glad he gets a second chance. I don't know if I can beat Voreth. You can't, not as you are now. My heart sank. But you're not just you, little moon. You're every Lunaris who came before. Every singer whose voice was silenced. They're all here. She touched my pendant. In this. In the stones of the citadel. In the song itself. I don't understand. Your name, Sera. It's beautiful, but it's not your true name. The name I whispered over you the night you were born. The name that carries the full weight of our bloodline. She leaned close, her lips near my ear. Seraphiel, she whispered. Daughter of the last light. Moonveil's final song. The pendant blazed, not with heat, with recognition. When you speak that name tomorrow, when you claim it fully, the song will answer. Not just yours, all of ours. Every Lunaris who ever lived will sing through you. Will I survive it? Her expression shifted, became something ancient and terrible and beautiful. Does the moon survive the night? Does the dawn survive the sun? You won't be unchanged, Seraphiel, but you will be victorious. She kissed my forehead. Now wake up. Your king is worried. I woke to daylight streaming through the windows and Kate asleep in the chair beside my bed. He looked younger like this, vulnerable. The weight of kingship and centuries of power temporarily lifted. I reached out and touched his hand. His eyes opened instantly, gold and alert. Sera, how do you feel? Like I've been trampled by a herd of horses, but alive. The shield is still holding, stronger if anything. The citadel stones are resonating with a frequency Silas says he's never measured before. I dreamed of my mother. Something in my voice made him lean forward. She told me my true name, the name I need to speak when I face Voreth. What is it? Seraphiel, daughter of the last light. Cade's breath caught. The old texts mention that name. The first Lunaris. The one who supposedly created the song itself. That's me, or I'm her, or we're the same line unbroken for 1,000 years. I sat up, ignoring the protest of my muscles. Tonight, when I face Voreth, I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every Lunaris he's murdered. And I'm going to end him. Not alone. Yes, alone. That was his challenge. Single combat. Then I'll stand with you at the edge. And if he tries to break the terms, if he brings his army, he won't. He's too arrogant. He wants to prove he can kill me the same way he killed my mother. Face to face, song against shadow. I swung my legs off the bed. Every movement hurt, but I forced myself to stand. How long until sunset? 6 hours. Then I need to eat, train with Silas one more time, and prepare. Kate stood blocking my path. Sera, if this goes badly, if you don't, I will. But if you don't, I need you to know. His hand cupped my face. These past days, finding you, protecting you, it's been the most important thing I've done in 200 years. The song swelled between us. Not violent, gentle, a harmony of two frequencies finding resonance. I know, I whispered. I feel it too. He kissed me then, not desperately, not like a goodbye, but like a promise, like the first line of a song that would take a lifetime to finish. When we broke apart, my pendant was glowing, steady and warm. Win, he said simply, and we'll have time to figure out what this is. I will. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Silas drilled me on focus techniques, ways to channel the song without burning out, how to read Vorath's corruption patterns and find the weak points. He's ancient, Silas warned. He's fought dozens of Lunaris over the centuries. He knows our tricks, our patterns. You'll need to do something unexpected. Like what? Like survive long enough for him to get cocky, like make him think he's winning, then strike when he's savoring his victory. So lose on purpose. Strategically retreat. There's a difference. We practiced until my voice was raw and my hands shook. Then Silas called a halt. That's enough. More will only exhaust you. Now eat, rest, and remember you're not hollow. You never were. I ate a meal I barely tasted. Vivian brought it personally, her eyes downcast. I'm sorry, she said quietly, for everything. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Thank you. Will you come back? I looked at her, really looked, and saw not the cruel girl who'd mocked me, but someone trying desperately to be better than what she'd been raised to be. Yes, and when I do, we'll start fresh. Both of us. She left crying, but this time they were good tears. As sunset approached, I dressed in simple clothes. No armor, no weapons. The Lunaris fought with song, not steel. The pendant hung around my neck, fully silver now. Every trace of tarnish burned away. Cade met me at the gates. The shield's down, he said. As agreed, for us waiting in the clearing 1/2 mile north. My wolves will escort you to the edge, then withdraw. And if he kills me, then I'll kill him, and probably die doing so, but he won't leave this forest alive. We walked in silence, surrounded by grim-faced lichen warriors. The clearing appeared through the trees like a wound in the forest, a perfect circle of dead grass, the earth scorched black from centuries of corruption. Vorath stood in the center. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Easily twice the size of a normal wolf, his form constantly shifting, smoke and flesh and shadow woven together into something that defied natural law. Little moon, he purred. You came, I'm touched. I'm here to end you. Are you? He laughed, and the sound made trees wither. Your mother said the same thing. Right before I opened her throat and listened to her song die in gurgling blood. Rage, white hot. The song surged numb. I forced it down. Silas's words, don't let him bait you. Strategic retreat. She was stronger than you'll ever be, I said calmly. Perhaps, but she's dead, and I'm not. That's what matters. He began to circle me. Do you know what I'm going to do to you, little moon? I'm going to corrupt your song. Turn it inside out. Make you one of us. Imagine it. A Lunaris Shadowborn. A creature of light twisted into darkness. The ultimate irony. You can try. Oh, I'll do more than try, huh? He attacked, not physically, with corruption. A wave of twisted frequency that slammed into me like a physical blow. My song rose automatically to counter it. Light against shadow. Hope against despair. For a moment, we were locked. Two frequencies colliding, neither giving ground. Then Vorath poured more power into his attack, and I felt my song buckle. Pain exploded through me. Not in my body, in my wolf, in the song itself. Like someone was trying to invert every note twist, every harmony into discord. I fell to my knees screaming. Yes, Vorath hissed. Sing for me, just like your mother. Through the pain, I heard Cade roar. Heard wolves preparing to charge. No, I managed. Stay. Back. This was the plan. Let him think he was winning. Let him get close. Vorath loomed over me, his jaws opening wide. Smoke and fire. and the stench of 1,000 corrupted souls. Any last words, little moon? I looked up at him, smiled through blood-stained teeth. Just one, my name. And I spoke it. Not Sera, not the name Garrett had used to diminish me. I am Seraphiel Moonveil, daughter of the last light, and this is my mother's song. The pendant exploded, not with light, with sound, with every Lunaris who had ever lived, every song ever sung, every note of defiance against the darkness. It poured through me, not from me, through me. I was the vessel, and they were the flood. My mother's voice, and her mother's, and hers, back and back and back until I heard the first singer, the one who had created the song in the dawn of the world. They sang through my throat, and the sound was devastating. Voreth screamed, his form began to disintegrate, smoke peeling away, flesh reverting. The corruption that had sustained him for 300 years unmaking itself note by note, frequency by frequency. No, he roared. I am eternal, You are ended, I said, and my voice was 1,000 voices, by the song you could never silence. The final note rang out, pure, perfect, absolute, Voreth shattered. Not dissolved, shattered, like glass struck by a hammer. His form broke apart into 1,000,000 fragments of light and shadow, and those fragments broke apart again until there was nothing left but clean air and the smell of rain after a drought. The clearing was silent. I knelt in the center, my pendant warmed, the song finally quiet. Then Cade was there, lifting me into his arms. You did it, he breathed. You actually did it. Behind him, every wolf present was bowing, not to him, to me. Seraphiel, Silas said, his ancient voice carrying across the clearing. The last light burns bright. I wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment. Instead, I fainted. I stood on the high terrace of the obsidian citadel and watched the sun come up over the Thornwood Mountains. The world looked different from here. Not just geographically, though. The citadel sat perched on a granite cliff that commanded a view spanning 3 territories. But internally, the landscape of my own heart had changed. The jagged terrain of fear and self-doubt that I had navigated for 12 years was softening, not gone. I was not so naive as to think that wounds healed in a season, but softer, walkable, mapped. I wore my pendant openly now, not tucked beneath a collar, not hidden from eyes that would mock it, but resting against the embroidered neckline of a dress that fit properly. Its crescent shape caught the morning light, fully silver, every scratch and nick visible. Thera had offered to restore it completely, to buff out every imperfection. I had declined. The scars were part of the story. Every mark was a year I had survived. The Lunaris training had continued after Voreth's death. Silas said I had natural talent, but talent without discipline was just noise. So I practiced. Every day. Learning to heal, to shield, to attune without burning out. Last week I had healed a young Omega's shattered leg. The week before I'd helped a traumatized refugee wolf find peace after years of nightmares. Small miracles. That was what the Lunaris did. Not grand displays of force, but small, precise miracles that mended what had been torn. Footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. I knew them by the rhythm, the weight, the way the stone responded to his presence. Cade joined me at the railing, close enough that our shoulders touched. You're up early, he said. Couldn't sleep. Too much happening today. Today, the day Garrett would face final judgment. After Voreth's defeat, the Lycan Council had convened to determine his fate. Death was the expected sentence, the traditional penalty for everything he'd done. But I had asked for something else. Exile to human lands, stripped of his wolf, powerless, alone. For an alpha who had built his entire identity on dominance, it was a fate worse than death. The council had agreed. Are you ready? Cade asked. To watch him sentenced, yes. To forgive him. No, maybe never. You don't have to forgive him. Mercy isn't the same as forgiveness. I know, but I want him to understand, to really see what he did, and I don't think he ever will. Then the mercy is for you, not him. We stood in comfortable silence. This had become our rhythm over the past months. Mornings on the terrace, quiet conversations, building something neither of us had words for yet, but both recognized as important. There's something else, Cade said. I looked at him. His expression was carefully neutral, which meant whatever he was about to say was anything but. The council wants to formalize your position. Make you Luna of the Obsidian Throne. My breath caught. That's not how this works. You'd have to marry you, yes. The world seemed to stop. Is that a proposal? It's a political reality. The council sees what you did, sees the power you wield. They want it bound to the throne. But what do you want? His gold eyes met mine, and in them I saw vulnerability that made my chest ache. I want you. Not because the council demands it, not because it's politically expedient, because every morning I wake up and the first thing I think is whether you're safe, whether you're happy, whether you'll be on this terrace when I come looking for you. He took my hand. I want to build something with you. Something that isn't about bloodlines or duty or ancient pacts. Just us. The song swelled, not as a weapon, as joy. Yes, I said. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. I'll be Luna. I'll stand beside you and drive the council crazy with Lunaris reforms and pack integration and probably 100 other things they'll hate. He laughed. The sound was so rare, so precious that I committed it to memory. Then he kissed me, and the pendant blazed warm between us, and the morning sun painted the mountains gold. Hours later, I stood in the judgment hall and watched Garrett Kinsley sentenced to exile. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The alpha aura was gone, suppressed by lichen magic that would strip his wolf permanently at the border. When they asked if I had anything to say, I stepped forward. You told me I was nothing, I said quietly. You beat that lesson into me for 12 years. Made me believe that being wolfless meant being worthless. I touched my pendant. But I was never nothing. I was the wolf that sings. I was the last light of a bloodline you tried to extinguish. I was everything you were too blind and cruel to see. I paused. I don't forgive you, but I release you. You have no power over me anymore. You never did. Garrett said nothing. His face was blank, uncomprehending to the end. They led him away. Vivian approached me after her eyes red. Thank you, she said, for speaking, for not asking for his death. He's your father. I couldn't do that to you. He was never really my father, not the way he should have been. She took a shaky breath. But I'm trying to be better, trying to understand what strength without cruelty looks like. You're doing well. Silas says your attunement training is progressing. He's a harsh teacher. The best ones are, she smiled, tentative but real. Kalen appeared next. He'd been managing Kinsley lands under Lycan oversight and by all accounts doing it well. The territories are stable, he reported. Tribute is flowing properly. No corruption marks in 3 months. Good, you're doing good work. I'm trying to undo what he taught me. It's harder than I thought. Change always is, but you're trying. That matters. As the hall emptied, Cade found me again. One more thing before tonight's celebration, he said. He led me to a private chamber where Mira waited, her expression carefully neutral. What's going on? Mira gestured for me to sit. I've been monitoring your health since Voreth's defeat. The amount of power you channeled, it changed things. My stomach dropped. Changed how? You're pregnant, the world tilted. What? About 8 weeks. The baby is healthy, strong, and... Mira hesitated. The frequency I'm reading is extraordinary. This child carries both Lycan and Lunaris bloodlines. Fully. It's unprecedented. I looked at Cade. His expression had gone from shock to wonder to fierce protectiveness in the span of seconds. We're having a baby, I whispered. We're having a baby, he confirmed. Then he was holding me, and I was crying, and the pendant was warm, and everything was terrifying and perfect in equal measure. That night we celebrated. Not the pregnancy, not yet, but the victory, the peace, the future that had seemed impossible 3 months ago. I stood on the terrace again as the feast raged below. The citadel was full of music and laughter. Wolves from every territory had come to honor the last Lunaris, to celebrate the end of the Shadowborn threat. Kay joined me, 2 goblets of wine in hand. He offered me one. I can't, I said. The baby. I know, it's grape juice. I laughed and took it. We stood together and watched the stars emerge one by one. Are you happy? He asked. I thought about the girl I'd been, kneeling on cold stone, scrubbing blood, certain she was nothing. I thought about my mother's pendant, the song she'd given me, the legacy she'd died protecting. I thought about the battles fought and won, the scars that would never fully heal, the strength that grew in soil made from grief. Yes, I said, I'm happy. And I was. They had called me hollow, wolfless, a stain on the family name. But I had never been empty. I had been a resonating chamber waiting for the song that would shatter kings and crown queens. I was Seraphiel Moonveil Luna of the Obsidian Throne, and my song had only just begun. Below me, the citadel sang with silver light. The amplification network I'd bonded with pulsed gently, a heartbeat in stone, and in my womb a new song was beginning. A harmony of light and shadow, moon and throne, old bloodlines and new futures. The pendant warmed against my chest, not as a warning, as a welcome. I touched it and smiled. Thank you, Mom, I whispered to the stars, for everything. The wind carried my words away, and somewhere in the distance, I could have sworn I heard her voice singing back.